is Judy from Patterns for Pirates, and I'm going to sew up some Fierce Undies with you today. These are the, I believe, low-rise cheekies. I know they're the cheeky cut line. I think it is the low-rise cut line that I cut. I have my front, my back, my crotch lining, and my waistband elastic. This is a 3/4 inch with a little scalloped edge, and it's got a plush back. It's going to be super cute. To start, all options, we're going to have the main front, main back, right sides together, and we're going to stitch up those side seams. Okay, so I'm back with my stitched side seams. This pattern has a 3/8 inch seam allowance, which is a little different for most of my patterns. I usually do a 1/2 inch, but when doing underwear, bras, swimwear, I tend to like a little bit smaller seam allowance. It's just more traditional, and my brain does better using that traditional seam allowance. So I'm going to keep my underwear just like this, but I'm going to flip it so that the back is on top. And I'm going to align them at the crotch at this center mark. I'm going to grab my crotch lining. You can finish this edge off. If you want it to be finished, you can leave it raw. It will not fray. Whatever you think looks best and feels the most comfortable for you. I'm going to leave mine raw. Sometimes I finish it and sometimes I leave it raw. Just depends on my mood. Now we're going to go to the corners. These are opposite curves, so you'll have to ease them in, but you should not need to stretch at all. The front crotch and the crotch lining are going to match exactly, and then the back crotch will be the opposite curve. I like to pin right at that 3/8 seam allowance, so I know they're matching on the sides there, right where my seam is going to be. You can see I didn't need to stretch anything to align it. Just have to kind of work those opposite curves in together. And I'm going to go to the opposite corner and do the same thing. Again, pinning right at that 3/8 seam allowance. And then I like to put in one more pin on this option on the adult sizing. It's just however many pins you feel comfortable with. There you go. I'm gonna flip my crotch lining and make sure I don't have a little wrinkle there. I felt like maybe I had a wrinkle there. There we go. So you will have to ease those two curves together, but they should all match at that 3/8 seam allowance. And now I'm just gonna stitch those 3 layers together. Okay, here I am. I just stitched all 3 layers together. They matched at the seam allowance, so they should all be even right at the 2 corners. I'm going to take my crotch lining piece and I'm going to flip it so that it encloses this seam right here. And it should flip and match your front crotch area perfectly. There we go. There is an option mentioned in the pattern that you can trim off 3/8 of an inch right here if you just want to eliminate one layer in your hem when you hem around the legs. I'm not going to do that this time. This is a pretty thin fabric I'm working with, and since the Cheeky Options has no elastic around the legs, it's also much thinner, so I'm going to opt not to do that this time. I'm going to head to my regular sewing machine, and I'm going to baste from here to here on both sides just to hold it in place for me. And I have basted along these 2 layers right here. Again, I'm going to leave mine raw. It does not bother, the look does not bother me, and the feel does not bother me. This knit that I'm working with tends to not roll, if you can see. It's not rolling very badly. If your knit tends to roll really bad, I would suggest finishing it off. You can use any finishing method that you like. You can run it down your serger if you have a serger or overlocker. You can zigzag stitch, you can overcast stitch, whatever you'd like. Right, next I am going to mark the top of my waistband on the right side all along the top edge. Grab your ruler, grab a marking tool, and don't skip this step. So there's my line. Now all I'm going to do is mark my waistband into quarters. I always cut center full notches, so there's my center back and there is my center front. It's just something that I am in the habit of doing. I do it on pretty much anything that's cut on the fold. And definitely I try to do it anytime I have to mark the center of that fold. So like necklines and things like that, I find it so much easier to mark when I'm cutting out with a little notch on that fold rather than trying to fold with seams and pieces that can be stretched and things like that. So I'm just marking my quarter points. And now I'm going to prep the waistband. Here's my waistband. It is, I said, a 3/4 inch plus back elastic. So the back side is plush. The front side looks like elastic. And this one happens to have an adorable little scallop. I'm going to make sure it's not twisted. And then you are going to, but you also, this one looks like I didn't cut it perfectly straight. It's a little bit out of an angle. So I'm going to trim that where it's perfectly straight. And you are going to butt the elastic up to each other. We are not going to overlap. We are just going to butt them together very tightly. And I like to use my widest zigzag stitch on my machine. My machine happens to go to a width of 7 on my zigzag, so I use a 7 width. And then I like to lower my stitch length down to a 1. I prefer to start a little below the edge, back up, come down all the way, and then I like to come back up one more time to my starting point. It's just my preference. I feel like it's nice and secure, and it's what I use every time. So I'll be right back after doing that. Okay, here I am. I'm just gonna snip my threads. And there is my very wide set zigzag stitch. Again, I like to use a 7 width and a 1, and I start here, go up and down and back up to my starting point. I find it nice and secure. One thing that some people like to do when they're butting elastic up together is use a tiny scrap of woven fabric. I didn't get that thread very well. is use a tiny little rectangle right here of woven fabric to stabilize this seam. If you're having a hard time getting your machine to do that very tight, thick, very wide zigzag, that's a little trick you can use, is put a little woven fabric right there to stabilize it as it goes through the machine. I've never struggled very much with getting my machine as long as I'm using that the stretch needle. And as long as I'm using that super wide set zigzag, I do not have a problem with my elastic coming apart or trying to fray at all. It is important to use your widest zigzag so that you make sure to enclose all of your edge and it doesn't fray on you. I am just quickly marking my waistband in 2/4 points. And now it's ready to attach to my underwear. You can put your seam either on the center back or on the side. It doesn't matter, whatever you prefer. I am just going to align the bottom of my elastic to the line that I drew, matching at the 1/4 points. As you match at the 1/4 points, you'll notice that your waistband elastic and the top of your underwear are the same. So you shouldn't need to stretch to fit. If you took exact seam allowances and cut super perfectly, and if not, it definitely shouldn't need to stretch much. Sometimes your underwear might have stretched out a tiny bit, depending on the kind of fabric you have, and it might feel like you need to stretch a little bit, but they're actually the same size from the pattern if proper seam allowances are being used. If you find you're feeling like you're needing to stretch a lot, you can double check your waistband measurement, and you can also give your underwear a good press around the top. So if it has stretched out, a good press around the top will help it come back to its original size. But as you can see, mine is aligning nicely and evenly, and I'm not going to have to stretch to fit. From the underside, here's what it looks like. It's just overlapped that 3/8 inch. So now I'm going to go to my machine, and I'm going to use a triple step zigzag to top stitch the elastic on. I, again, do not need to stretch. I'm just going to be aligning the bottom of my elastic to that little marked line all the way around. Okay, here I am after taking it to my sewing machine and just top stitching this waistband on. I used a triple step zigzag. I did use black thread, so you might not be able to see very well, but I just aligned that bottom up with this little marked line that I have the best I could all the way around. And here's what it looks like on the inside. I like to take very small sharp scissors and trim away my excess seam allowance. There's not much when you use a wider zigzag, but there is a tiny bit, so I like to trim it off, so just so it doesn't roll and feel bulky. And we are almost done. All we're going to do now is press under our legs 3/8 of an inch and hem them, and we'll have some Fierce Undies ready to be worn. So I'm going to press under 3/8 of an inch all the way around the leg, and then I'm going to hem with my triple step zigzag. Okay, here I am. I have pressed and hemmed all around my legs. I have not pressed again. I wanted to show you removing these basting stitches. I actually already removed this side, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to show how I do that quickly and easily. So this is the baste from basting this crotch liner to the side seams. And all you're going to do is give it a little tug, and you'll hear it pop, and you can just pull it out. Removing basting stitches on knit is so quick and easy. That's why it's so worth the time of running that quick basting stitch. I mean, how quick and easy was that to remove? And now all my Fierce Undies need is a press around the legs, and I could press right here to get the little marking off. Maybe add a little bow, who knows? I love adding a little embellishment right here. I have not outgrown that. I don't think I ever will. My daughter also really loves a little bow at her front center, and so maybe I'll find one to add to these too. I can't wait to see yours. I hope you have fun sewing up this quick, easy pattern. Fill up your drawers with the necessity of undies, and I hope one of the cuts is your personal favorite. I have always worn low-cut underwear. I've never purchased anything else, but you know what? I tried out the mid-rise, I tried out the high-rise. Maybe you can try out a new style that you've never bought. Have fun sewing them up, and maybe they'll be your new favorites. I can't wait to see your new Fierce Undies. Thanks, guys.